So a little bit about myself and our property and asset management function within our diocese. So of course myself and Linda and Jamie and Sanjay were part of diocesan senior staff based out of Ascension House. My role a little bit different than some of the others in that I have more flexibility to travel, and so I encourage you to keep that in mind, depending on the nature of the issues or concerns or ideas that you have. Feel free to reach out to my office, and we're certainly willing to come take a look, be boots on the ground presences within your parishes and property portfolios. I'll skip down a little bit. Amy Elliott is a new hire within my office, and she's our property and asset management administrative assistant. She's been in her role for 4 or 5 months now, and she's learning very quickly. And so she's the main point of contact within Ascension House if I'm out at Hollier House or at parishes or whatever the case may be. So we have that firm point of contact now, email-wise and otherwise, at Ascension House, and so our little team is growing, which is great. Anyhow, so I'm a resource member along with Sanjay on the Diocesan Property and Finance Committee, and I'll speak to that a little bit later and kind of what that means for all of you. Along with Linda, Sanjay, actually is Sanjay even on the, I don't believe Sanjay is on the cemetery subcommittee, but Linda certainly is, and Sean Scarmita, our Commissioner of Cemeteries, so we speak to issues there. I know we've already had a few chats this morning about cemeteries. So that's an area that we can certainly make inroads as well. Resource member of the Risk Management Committee and board member of the Cathedral Hill Foundation. That has less to do with our diocese as a whole, but it's still an important function. And so what I like to say our property and asset management function does is support parishes and our community ministries with their own portfolios. And so we have kind of the aggregate diocesan portfolio that we look at from a higher level, but also we understand that you all have your own portfolios to deal with. And we're here to support, to help enable collaboration between parishes, because often there is inspiration and there's precedent for some of the issues that you face or the solutions that you're looking to. Your neighbors and what have you have likely faced similar issues, so we like to foster that. Property and Finance Committee. So, of course, for more significant issues, and we'll get into thresholds and decision-making rights and all of that, but we are thrilled to offer guidance around some of the more complex issues that you would face from a property or asset management perspective once they begin to enter that, that kind of realm of decision-making. Of course, you would have special vestry and kind of that internal portion as well, and we, along with our Dawson Chancellor, Henry Schultz, help with motions. We help with just kind of shaping the thinking around some of those more significant efforts that you would put forth from a parish perspective in front of our Dawson Property and Finance Committee, so happy to dig in that way. I mentioned Hollier House. I'm not sure how much you can actually read here, so I'll try not to make it self-explanatory as if you're able to see what I'm saying. We'll try to make it more of a talk, but Hollier House is one that I just mentioned here along with some of those more high-level functions, mostly because, in full transparency, it's a major effort from our diocese, and it's a bit of a unique one in that from an affordable housing perspective, we are the direct owner and operator of this property at the diocesan level. It's probably a one and done in that format. But as it stands today, the rent up is something that does take up a lot of our office's capacity, the operations of it, the kind of high level strategic management of it, and we are scaling that and kind of manipulating that into something that is sensible moving forward, but it's still kind of in that transition phase. So I mention it to say that from a property and asset management perspective, with respect to our diocese, that is, you know, there's some capacity dedicated just to Hollier House at the moment. Now, what we will cover today. Capital projects. So Parishes have decisions to make when looking at churches, rectories, brownfield land within the portfolio, where you're considering different land uses, whether it be renovations, whether it be additions, whether it be new construction, whatever the case may be. We've seen it all, and we're happy to shape again and support that thinking around how do we navigate this? How do we start to gain consensus amongst our parishes, and where do we find the money, and how do we go through compliance and approvals and so on and so forth. So I'll speak to that. Diocesan project approvals process, I made mention of that a moment ago in terms of the Property and Finance Committee. Preventative maintenance is, and reactive maintenance, the evil twin. Those are two concepts that I will probably speak to every single time we have conversations like this. And then short and long-term rentals. So revenue generating opportunities for the parishes and how to navigate those. So those are kind of the main 6 or 7 themes that we'll speak to today. So capital projects. The first thing that I like to ask, the first question I like to ask leaders from within parishes when they approach me with a notion or an idea or a problem is, what is that problem? Can you, in one sentence, in an elevator pitch, tell me what your problem is that you're looking to solve? The idea is to identify the correct scope of work for a capital project, because if you look around a parish, you can name dozens of things that are nice to haves, nice to do's. But the reality is there's a finite limit to where the finances of the parish ought to be allocated. Where would the best return on your investment be? When looking at risk mitigation, where are you investing your funds in such a way that you're reducing your risk profile for your property portfolio, et cetera, rather than getting caught up in kind of, some of the more alluring opportunities to have artists' renderings and kind of new, sleek-looking additions to the properties and what have you. It's kind of about that nuts and bolts, and Linda had mentioned nuts and bolts, the nuts and bolts approach to thinking of what actually do we need to solve, not want to. So I really urge parishes when starting to kind of go down that path of we're running into capacity challenges, we're outgrowing our space, or certain elements of our building portfolio are aging out, or whatever the case may be. What's the actual problem? And then you have to take stock as far as where is your parish at? So again, does the parish have the resources and competency to lead an effort at the moment? If not, how would you approach that? What kind of third-party support would you need to bring in? I mentioned, does the parish have the resources? And I'm not just suggesting the financial resources. There's, of course, what I think is more important, the human resources. Sometimes parishes, you'd be shocked at where the expertise comes from within. And we had a chat the other day with the good folks at St. James Perth, and it turns out that they're looking at creative uses of, or what the future holds for a part of their property portfolio, and it turns out that within their parish, they have somebody that's familiar with the planning landscape and would be able to potentially, I'm not promising on behalf, but there's a pathway there where theoretically they could lean on folks within their parish to start to drive towards what a outside consultant would have to therefore provide if they didn't have that person within. So identifying that human resource quotient within your parish and really trying to understand how you can drive solutions home is really important. And I'm going to speak to this very high level, but when thinking about, at the very outset of a project, when thinking about budgeting, and throw a round number out, we have a project, it's going to cost $100,000, we think. Of course, best practice is to always go get multiple quotes. disclose conflicts of interest, and hopefully you're not getting quotes from folks within the parish, but a degree or two of separation and conflicts of interest disclosed. Think about contingency, and in kind of the property and asset management world, industry best practice and thinking is 5 to 10% of whatever you're looking to allocate towards a capital effort, you should stash away for contingency in the event something goes wrong. I don't think that fully applies to what we do here in parish land, because we're dealing with building stock that is usually a lot older, and there's a lot more of those unknown unknowns when you start to take out a wall or look at a different building system, and you have to go back and have an awkward conversation with the contractor that you're working with, and they hit you with a change order, and all of a sudden that $100,000 budget is $120,000, and that's a 20% contingency right there. So Sanjay would smile if he was here, he's on his way, but he would smile if I said 20 to 25% from a diocesan perspective. Sounds like an intimidating kind of factor, but it's smart to think in those terms if you're about to undergo this capital effort, in that let's set aside 25%, and if we have that remaining after, wonderful. But there's a fairly high likelihood that we're going to blow through some or most of that, just with respect to age of building stock, as well as in that issue of institutional knowledge. And so, as a diocese, some parishes are wonderful at this, and some struggle, but that handover of institutional knowledge, some elements are lost in time. We have Glenn Lockwood, who does diligent work in our archives, and if he had his way, there would be no loss of institutional knowledge. But from time to time, memos are missed when folks come and go from a warden perspective or a property committee perspective or whatever the case may be. And so based on those two factors of kind of age of building stock, those unknown unknowns that you face just due to deterioration in age, and also that kind of human element factor and the loss on the handoffs of information, we find ourselves in a place where that contingency factor has to be bigger. It's unfortunate, but it's a reality that we have to face. So those are the high-level elements that I would urge you to consider at the very outset of those conversations where folks get excited around, well, we have some funds, and we have some energy, and we have this problem that we think we know what it is. Let's move forward. And I would urge you to kind of hit the pause button and ask those questions. So you'll be able to see those, of course, when the slideshow's released. And I would have a think over those if you're in that position of looking into a capital project in the near future. So very quickly, the diocesan approval thresholds and decision rights. For property and finance, we look at projects and we review efforts where and these types of proposals would come to us at a point where there were already multiple quotations and it looks like the budget of whatever the effort is greater than $50,000. And so that's at the diocesan level. Prior to that, at that 50,000 threshold, the parish would already have to be at a consensus as far as special vestry and motions having passed through that into the property finance realm. And it's also important to note that archdeacon approval is required for those efforts as well. So there's kind of three major things. Now, the bishop does have the right to kind of step in at his discretion. We talk about those three kind of elements of special vestry, P&F, and archdeacon for projects greater than $50,000 in value. Between $15,000 and $50,000, 15 and 50, the decision-making rights rest with parish council as well as archdeacon approval. And for projects or efforts less than or equal to $15,000, it's simply just parish corporation approval. So just get your ducks in a row from a parish perspective, off you go. What we used to have, I think, was about a year and a half ago, was a different structure, and we realized we'd kind of moved past that with respect to the value of money and inflation. It had sat there for about a generation at $10,000 or less, 10 to 30, and 30,000 and over. And now we're we've seen what's happened to our dollar in the last number of years, so we figured we'll give you the autonomy of that 15,000 and less, and then a bit more breathing room without having to bring things all the way to property and finance at less than $50,000. So just to kind of shape your thinking around the magnitude of projects and what have you, those are the thresholds. And for capital projects and efforts around renovations, additions, whatever the case may be, I want to speak very quickly to contractor relations. And most of us in the room likely have, at one point or another, on a residential level, dealt with contractors, and you have a basic understanding at the very least of how to deal with a plumber, how to deal with a drywall guy, whatever the case is, right? But things change when you're dealing with larger scopes of work, multiple bidders, you're representing a parish, and you're dealing with more of those commercial grade as opposed to residential grade contractors. There's a change in dynamic. And I had mentioned this a little bit earlier, but one thing I want you all to be wary of is the power of the change order. And I'm going to skip to my final point. I just want to emphasize this. Contingency. So your contingency that Sanjay would be harping on, that 20 to 25%, well above industry standard, it's always at risk through the change order. And what I mean by that is you have your scope of work, you go to your multiple contractors, apples to apples scopes of work, they bid, they look at it in terms of their own approach to cost, and they try to drive down the cost to be as competitive as possible. You ensure from their proposal standpoint that there's a completeness to their proposal that mirrors your scope of work. You look at the timeline. Are they expedient, or are they going to drag their feet out because they have 4 other jobs and they're going to plug you in on a Saturday? Or is it something that is clearly a priority for them? And you obviously look to their references, right? And where have they been at? Where are they trending within their last few jobs? Are they in a position where they're operating out of strength of cash flow, as it would seem, based on glowing references, jobs done on time, on brand, well done in recent times from the references, or not? So you would leverage that selection criteria, and you'd select a contractor. What you don't want to do is instinctively select the contractor that goes lowest cost. I'm not saying don't do that, but don't instinctively do that, because what you may be doing is putting yourself in a position to be change ordered to death on the back end. They know how to budget and estimate for jobs, and they also know that from time to time, the project owner might have that instinct, and they kind of can sniff that out and exploit it. So I'm just putting that out there. It's a bit of a different dynamic than the residential type of dynamic you'd experience with a homeowner that you break bread with in your kitchen, and you give them Timbits every day, and off you go, and they finish your cabinets or whatever the case may be. This is a bit different. And you want to identify an experienced contractor relations person. I'm looking at Detlef. He's a great example. I'm glad you're here, because I'm watching over the last number of years the efforts taking place over at St. John the Evangelist on Elgin Street. And honestly, if it were not for Detlef checking in every day and keeping that accountability factor, but that positive relationship factor with Lundy, the general contractors taking on their major works around structural and electrical, I don't know where that project would have gone, but you had somebody within the parish that was able to keep them accountable. And when you stay on top of them, there's less of a likelihood that they're going to sneak in elements around change orders and then drive that cost up and blow through your contingency. And so I'm just putting it out there. We've seen it on both sides as far as success stories and not so successful stories, where you have contractors that just know the game a little bit better than parishes. And so just govern yourselves accordingly and maybe don't blow up Detlef's phone. You can come to me for some of those pointers. But the point is, ultimately, from a contractor relations standpoint, just know that they have your best interests at mind typically, but you could be putting yourself in a bit of a vulnerable spot if you're not totally conscientious of how that dynamic works. So capital projects, I have a a chart here. It's really not worth looking at the moment, but what it really, I'll speak to it, and it's a bit of a rehash and just a reemphasis of what I was mentioning earlier. So for capital efforts greater than $50,000, the way it would actually look, so if we do a flow chart, and it's a bit chronological, right? The way it would actually look is you'd come up with a concept. You'd kind of stress test that concept within the leadership of your parish and realize you have a bit of a consensus, you have a bit of momentum, this looks achievable, okay, great. You'd bring that project concept to my office and to Sanjay's office. And you'd tell us, what the problem is, what the solution is, and what the process is. Do we have that human resource quotient within our parish to drive this home? Is it realistic? We would brief the bishop on the project and have a bit of a powwow. We'd kind of compare it to similar efforts that have happened, wins, losses, and we'd get back to you with feedback. Assuming that feedback is positive and that this is a great effort, looks like it's going to be valuable for your parish, etc., we would urge you to have your parish council create a proposal, including firmed up estimates, budgeting, and funding. So when sufficient details are gathered, the parish corporation would consult with the aforementioned diocesan directors and the chair of the Property and Finance Committee, so that's Tracy Albert at the moment, prior to presenting details to the parish for approval. So it's a good idea at this point to hold one or more information meetings prior to that special vestry. One thing that you don't want to find, one position you don't want to find yourself in is essentially debating the merits of a project on the floor at special vestry. So that's why it's great to preempt that with an information meeting where you can kind of get those questions out of the way, understand if there's objections, how to overcome those or meet those in the middle, and at the point at which you have that special vestry, you have that buy-in, you've already got that feedback. So everything goes through special vestry. You've gotten help from our diocesan chancellor. Your motion's bulletproof. Off it goes. It's time to meet property and finance. So the motion's prepared. Everything's great for property and finance, and it would hit the floor for approval. So typically what happens is somebody from the parish comes in, makes a presentation in front of the committee, usually via Zoom, steps off, and then a vote is made, and you'll get a text as to whether or not, on the fly, you got the green light or you need to go back and work on the idea. And then at that point, assuming everything's great, final approval is given. So that's essentially the flow of things as far as capital projects go. I know there's a lot more specific information we could talk about depending on the nature of a capital project and where you're at, age and stage of a parish, but those are kind of the general terms. So I'm going to switch gears over to reactive maintenance for a moment. And I did this last time, and I'd be curious to see, we're at about the same season of the year, but I'd be curious, given the representation from across all the different deaneries, we'll maybe get 3 or 4 examples, and don't be shy. What are some of the most recent, unforeseen, reactive property maintenance concerns, problems, issues that your parish has had to address, as I said, in recent months? So recently installed an in-ground pool in the nave, and then now you have drainage issues. I usually like to think that I've seen it all. That one's new. So I'd be interested to connect with you later on and really chew on that one. Interesting. Okay, anybody else? So I'm going to address that point right now. I'm sure that's on top of mind for many. And it was an effort that I was looking to put out there about 2 years ago. And the way that I've found, the best way that I've found, and maybe it's not as immediate for you, but for the time being, flip our property@ottawa.anglican.ca email a note and just say, hey, we have a need for a contractor in this area. The one thing is, if you look at the geographic spread of all of you here today, the Venn diagram is all these discrete circles and bubbles, basically, of contractors. So it's challenging to not alienate certain parishes by focusing on one area where we have a great Rolodex of contractors And then another area where we may have to do a bit of digging and gaining references and what have you. But I have somebody for you. You're St. Thomas Stittsville, is that right?
Yes.
So I have somebody top of mind for you. Grizzly Glass would be the name of the contractor. So
I got an estimate from Grizzly Glass coming on Tuesday.
okay, well tell Donnie at Grizzly Glass Joel said hi. And he owes me a shawarma. Anyways, okay.
Don is showing up on Tuesday.
Good, good. Well, tell him I say hi.
You see, this is exactly what we need.
Yeah, you bet. Well, it seems like you're already on it, but I agree, yes. And the good thing about Grizzly Glass, not to totally weave into a different thread here, but they've done some work over at St. Luke's. They've done some work. Anyhow, they're a pre-approved diocesan contractor. So there you go.
Thank you.
Okay, so those are some great examples of reactive, unforeseen maintenance concerns that are facing parishes. And you can kind of understand the broad, I mean, most of them have to do with water, but very different elements of the properties. And just not fun, right? Many of you are volunteers, and all of a sudden you have a problem. If you're boots on the ground dealing with it, your boots might get wet. It's not a fun issue to face. So rest assured, I have a message here, and I'm hoping it's an encouraging one. So we offer support for reactive maintenance efforts. Where would you look to? So first and foremost, always get in touch with us at our office, and typically we'll have somebody ready to go. If not, we're 1 degree of separation away from throwing you a couple references for contractors, if that's what you need. Also talk to your regional deans, because they're able to network you with parishes that are in your area. And as I talked about from the standpoint of geographic clustering, you're more likely to find somebody that can support you when you're talking with neighboring parishes. So if you're collaborating in that manner and thinking geographically, it helps. So again, neighboring parishes, also think about other denominations within your catchment area, if you will. So folks in United churches, Catholic churches, synagogues, mosques, whatever the case may be, you do want to kind of have that element of familiarity, if possible, when dealing with contractors that deal with faith-based groups. Totally not necessary. It does help from a comfort level perspective that you're dealing with folks with integrity, and usually that's kind of a lead indicator of that if they have experience dealing with faith groups. Not mandatory, sometimes depending on the specialty, not possible. But, so think to neighboring parishes and other denominations too when you're stumped as far as we have this issue, it just came up, it's a fairly urgent and or important issue. I don't know what to do, and I got water, or I got a work order for the fire department. I'm not sure, I have a deadline I have to meet. Regional deans, neighboring parishes, other denominations or other faith-based groups, and of course, Ascension House. So help is there, right? Don't feel like you have to have the weight of the world on your shoulders with kind of a ticking clock. Again, identifying extent and scope of concern. So what is the actual problem that we're looking to solve? I urge you to always kind of think around the concept of root cause, right? So it's tempting with respect to reactive maintenance sometimes to look at the symptom and treat the symptom, but then you're going to have a recurring symptom. So it's probably nothing you don't already know, but take the opportunity to look at what that root cause would be, and you'd be able to kind of have that campsite principle in play and leave it better than you found it after the fact, if you look at it that way when you're dealing with reactive issues. So when talking about the extent and scope of the concerns around a reactive problem or kind of an unforeseen problem, reach out to us as well for guidance around insurance considerations, because there may be, and I'll speak to this a little bit later, but there may be implications or opportunities from an insurance standpoint, whether it's our own diocesan self-insurance program that I'll explain, or whether it's something that would volley up to our broker and our insurer. And again, we're here to offer contractor support. So hit us with your best shot in terms of what trade you're looking at and what area you are, and we'll try to plug you in with somebody if you don't already have that connection. Also, again, that kind of shouldering the load of these reactive problems, oftentimes it can become an emotional issue where folks within the parishes have different viewpoints and different opinions on the urgency of the problem and so on and so forth. It's important to get consensus, talk it through, be collaborative, you're dealing with folks, again, that are volunteers, right? So just in many instances. So remember that. Excuse me. Remember that when keeping that whole concept of the problem at hand in context. Think about delegation. Think about, if you have a custodian, lean on that person. If you have trusted third-party service providers, lean on them. And of course, that collaboration within your property committee. So reactive maintenance, never fun to deal with a problem you didn't, if you were having that December meeting, planning the year ahead, and all of a sudden you're dealing with tree roots through a sewer main or whatever the case may be. Never fun, but you have lots of support through our diocese and otherwise. Thank you, Detlef. Amazing. And just remember that you have support from within, you have support abroad from your peers, and you have support from Ascension House. And I'm going to segue into preventative maintenance from that element of reactive maintenance. For folks that came last year, you'll see the link, but I always emphasize the concept of proactive and or preventative maintenance. And why do I do that? I looked this up since the last time we presented because I gave a vague concept of there's a better return on your parish dollar when you plan things out and have kind of a 1, 5, 10-year capital plan and preventative maintenance plan versus just dealing with things flying by the seat of your pants. And I looked it up. The International Facility Management Association did a kind of a financial or economic study and came to the conclusion that for every dollar spent on preventative maintenance, you save $4 to $5 in offset reactive repairs. And I knew it was significant, but that really drove it home. I'm going to repeat that. For every dollar you spend on preventative maintenance, $4 or $5 would have otherwise been the cost if dealing with it reactively. When we're dealing with parish financial constraints, that's one way in terms of a proactive approach to your property portfolio that you can be setting yourself up for sustainability and success into the future, is by mapping these things out and just looking at all the different, and I'll get into the specifics, but looking at all the different building components and systems within your portfolio and just regular diligent checks, regular check-ins quarterly with contractors for certain systems, and just having people assigned and knowing when to speak to it in terms of if your property committee is meeting, knowing what the components are, did we do this, did we check that, excellent, is this at the end of its useful life, let's go get quotes before it fails. Amazing. And basically, you look at poorly maintained systems when folks are more on the reactive side, talking about HVAC, plumbing, roofing, et cetera, they fail sooner when they're poorly maintained, and they lead to more frequent replacements and shorter asset life. So you can squeeze more juice out of, and this goes without saying, but you can squeeze more juice out of systems and components of your portfolios that are just regularly checked in on, regularly maintained, and you're paying the piper every lap you do, every quarter with a contractor, whatever the case may be, but you're avoiding that Christmas Eve, 2 a.m. inevitable failure where you get the call and you want to be with your family and you're the one assigned to dealing with the sump pump in the basement, and all of a sudden you've got ankle deep water, and so you have to call in a contractor. He's at time and a half times 2, and then when they come in, they plug the hole and they propose a repair and they price in a vacation to Jamaica in that repair too, and you think, well, we don't really have a choice, and off you go, and you've spent $4 to $5 when you could have spent $1. So I put that emphasis there just to really shape the thinking around the value of preventative maintenance. The other aspect is deferred maintenance increases the risk of major property damage. So water leaks leading to mold, leading to X, Y, Z. You have that kind of domino effect of what ends up being loss and potential liability claims, health and safety issues. So there's so many areas that are critical to kind of rein in as far as risk and finance that are addressable if you have a relatively simplistic preventative maintenance plan. Well, how do we go about getting a relatively simple preventative maintenance plan? Reach out to our office. We have templates and resources that can support onboarding your resources that you already have and the folks that are already in these roles. We can create custom preventative maintenance checklists that speak to all of the different building systems and components that you have within your buildings, churches, rectories, et cetera, parish halls, that then would put all of these different elements with an owner or a responsible, accountable person who can speak to when that revolving schedule of maintenance is required. It also would populate essentially a calendar where you'd be able to draw on your agendas every month. Okay, we have to speak to XYZ building components. Are they done? Great. Did we take a look at that? Did we bring the contractor in? Is that signed off on? Did we change the filter? Excellent. And so it really just makes it very transparent as far as the approach to your portfolio when you can list out every single aspect that needs to be spoken to at every interval and then just speak to it. And so we're happy to do a consultation with each and every parish and set you up in such a fashion that you're able to kind of take bite-sized chunks out of your property and save those $4 to $5 on the back end in that Christmas Eve stressful moment where, as a volunteer, you're having to come into the parish and try to triage a problem in lieu of this whole kind of calm and collected preventative maintenance approach. So it's a great resource to ensure continuity of service to your buildings, as well as folks come and go on your property committees, and from a warden perspective. And when you have this type of template, that institutional knowledge just survives on and lives on, and you don't have that kind of loss. This is going to provide absolutely no value in the current form that it's in, but it's an example. It wouldn't have anyways, to be honest with you, even if we had a projector with way better luminosity. But it speaks to kind of the size of and kind of the effectiveness of this preventative maintenance template and schedule. We break things down very specifically, and so this, what I have here is actually an example of our preventative maintenance checklist, and broken down by month, by day, with designated authorities listed as far as either exterior contractors or somebody from within a parish, notes that are transferred, and so on and so forth. So again, highly encourage parishes and totally willing to meet at any point in time with parishes, except for the next 4 months when I'm going to be off on parental leave. But Amy will be happy to be there in my stead, but totally happy to meet with parishes around preventative maintenance. This is just an example of the calendar, so January to December, and a listing of the different elements of a theoretical parish, and basically if you're having a monthly property committee check-in meeting, email chain, whatever the case may be, hey, these are on our agenda for this month as far as building systems or elements that are up for discussion from a preventative maintenance standpoint. We have them up here, let's talk about them, great. And we have that confidence or assurance that we're steering our buildings to the best of our abilities. Insurance, property insurance and loss. So Sanjay will speak to this a little bit more in depth than I will, but I'm just going to address insurance from a property perspective alone. So our insurer, of course, is Ecclesiastical Insurance. Our broker is Hub International, and plainly speaking, premium increases have been a tremendous concern over the last number of years. Now, Sanjay, in particular, giving him a compliment, he's not even here to hear it. In particular, Sanjay did great work at lobbying to drive down our premium increases through all the different levers that he had put into play in designing the way that our insurance program collectively works. At the last point, in December of this past year, to really kind of curb the trend that had been happening, especially over the last 2 years prior to that, of sharp premium increases. They were sector-wide. There was really not much we could do. And in fact, when we had conversations with our colleagues across the ecclesiastical province of Ontario and the various other dioceses, we found, and this is no word of a lie, we found that we were actually more well-equipped in the Diocese of Ottawa and more future-proofed as far as our approach to parish and diocesan insurance than virtually all the others. And that's no slight on them, but it's a testament to the work and kind of the forward-thinking approach that both Sanjay and David McNamara, the Vice President of Hub, our broker, have had when approaching premium increases and just overall insurance costs. But with that said, it's still a major concern, sector-wide, diocese-wide, at the parish level, this notion of insurance and kind of that ever ratcheting up of what the baseline requirements are and what the levers are that we can play. So I'll speak to one example relative to other dioceses in Ontario of where we were more future-proofed. We have other dioceses asking us about our self-insurance program because it's relatively novel compared to all the others. And of course, it's unfortunate if you are familiar with it because it means you've had to deal with a loss. But we set the parish deductibles for any sort of issue that kind of happens in an unforeseen way that hopefully would be addressable with a preventive maintenance program in the future, but at $2,500. So parishes are responsible for if there's a sump pump failure, a flood, you have a cleanup crew that has to come and dehumidify the space, get rid of the water, and deal with the fallout of that and replace a sump pump system, whatever the case may be. There's an example. The parish should be responsible for $2,500 of whatever the ultimate invoicing is to deal with that problem. Above and beyond that $2,500 and less than $25,000, where the ecclesiastical deductible kicks in, our diocese covers the balance. So for instance, let's call it a $25,000 incident. $22,500 would be covered by our diocese, $2,500 would be covered by the parish. Of course, you'd provide documentation, photos, invoicing, etc. And then we'd have a bit of a post-mortem as to how can we avoid this going into the future because this came out of central funds and we don't want this to be a repeatable theme. But that's the way our program works. It's not the way every other diocese approaches it. In fact, they have often lower deductibles and therefore higher premiums. So that's one way in which we have set money aside in a strategic way to then offset our overall premium increases year over year. And I credit that to Sanjay. He's kind of had that in place for quite a while. So I don't believe we've really stressed out that, and this is a testament to, I think, the good work that many of you are doing. I don't think we've stressed out that fund, that diocesan self-insurance fund, to a great degree most years, which is wonderful. But again, it keeps the deductibles down. And so major capital projects and insurance, I just want to link those two concepts up for a moment. And there is a bit of a responsibility for our diocese to kind of catch this because we do have the opportunity to, but say a project goes through special vestry, property and finance, and it's completed. We do need confirmation at the diocesan level that you've done a $100,000 upgrade to your bell tower, or whatever the case may be, because we then need to inform our broker, who needs to inform ecclesiastical to make sure that your coverage is adequate. So there's a bit of a feedback loop there. We've had examples where we've had loss incidents that followed major renovations, which is frustrating in and of itself, that you have all this great work undone by a relatively catastrophic incident. But this has been in the past where the insurance companies have come to us and said, okay, well, here's your ultimate payout. And we've said, well, the property's actually worth X plus Y. And they said, well, here's X. And we didn't inform them, or there wasn't that plug-in of that work that had been done to add value or equity to the property. And so that's an important thing to note as far as from a capital project perspective and an insurance perspective. You want to make sure that they mirror each other in terms of the realities of your property at a snapshot in time. But as I said, usually we should be able to catch that from our office, but just to be sure, it's important to kind of send that confirmation. Our project is complete. The invoicing came through at this amount, and please make sure that Hub and ecclesiastical are informed. Yes? So the question was, if, and I'll characterize that as a capital expenditure is made on a building component or system, and a life cycle upgrade, we'll call it. Does that bring down or have an effect on the overall insurance profile? It won't bring it down. It'll be music to the ears of our insurers, but those aren't the particulars that they really focus on. They have kind of a full value that they've indexed for a property. and they assume that you're going to be stewarding it in a way that best practices are followed. They at least hope. Everybody does. And but if you go and you execute that and you say, okay, we've done our roof is at 25 years, we've replaced it, and we poured $100,000 into that, that won't have an impact on a decrease as far as insurance costs. That will kind of maintain. I guess what I'm more talking about is if you go and you have an addition to a property or something that adds equity to the overall package of or your portfolio. If you had $1 million church and you did something that added $250,000, you put in an addition with an accessible washroom and a rentable space and so on and so forth, our insurers need to know about it. In the event of a loss, they're able to then pay that out and adjust accordingly. So I hope that addressed your question. Okay, so I'm going to switch gears to loss, and just very quickly, this was more topical last year when CCBC had just faced a loss of, I think they had computer systems and projectors and what have you stolen right before our presentation last year. And in the event of a break-in, always call the police and make a report. Every single time, make a police report. That goes without saying. And I want to make note that the self-insurance program that I just mentioned is limited to just property damage. So it does not cover, it's not an insurance program that would cover loss or theft or whatever the case may be. It's simply property damage. And again, this goes without saying as well, but I will say it from a loss prevention perspective. Ensure that best practices are followed for security and so on and so forth. One example of that I like to put forward is that every year or so, you want to do a key audit. So you do a roll call of who's a key holder in the parish. Did so-and-so lose their keys and the war amps didn't return them in the mail? Okay, maybe we should have a locksmith come, change the locks, because we have a bit of a vulnerability there. And then keep a log or what have you of who is a key holder and who isn't. And so that's one example, but ensuring best practices for security are followed, and that's kind of based on parish finances. If you do have the wherewithal, install a camera or two at means of ingress egress for your parish, and that way you can kind of keep tabs on potential losses, of course security systems as well. And I'm going to conclude by talking about short and long-term rentals. So we had somebody at the beginning mention, I think in Russell, you were talking about potential revenue-generating opportunities in terms of your portfolio, your property. I'll start with commercial leases. So we offer support in terms of lease negotiation processes and lease templates. It's not uncommon that folks within parishes actually have creative opportunities through their own networks or through church networks to engage in these relationships with other small businesses or practitioners or food trucks or whatever the case may be. I could ask for examples again, but last time we had quite a wide spectrum of folks that rented space from churches. You'd be shocked. And so what we do is we offer support through managing tenant relations, managing lease negotiations, and lease agreement templates that our Dawson Chancellor, along with folks from, I think it was Soloway Wright. We had a lawyer from Soloway Wright draw that up with Henry. And so we have you set up if you want to look to that commercial lease angle to begin to monetize excess space within your properties. I also encourage you to speak to your regional deans and collaborate amongst each other and kind of get some inspiration and ideas. Events and recurring rental of parish space. So contact Ascension House when in doubt as far as the compatibility of a potential rental group. So if you have to kind of ask yourselves the question of, we have this opportunity to rent, but I'm not sure if it's appropriate. Linda would be a great resource there, not to put you on the spot, but Linda would be a great resource to reach out to and say, is this faith-based group or otherwise the right compatible fit for our parish, because we do have an opportunity to monetize our space and we could use the money, but we don't want to overstep. We have a licensing agreement template as well, and the distinction between the lease agreement and the licensing agreement is that lease agreements typically longer term and more permanent tenants in terms of use of space. Licensing agreement, more sporadic use and shorter term. Of course, in both instances, third-party liability insurance is critical that the tenants have protection that way. And then in terms of residential tenancies, this is one area where, for whatever reason, in the last week or two, I've had a number of parishes reach out. I guess it's that time of year. What are we doing with our rectory? We need to shape thinking around how we use our rectory. Do we want to invest in it? Do we want to sell it? What do we want to do? When renting it out to residential tenants, it's important to understand that you are subject to the Residential Tenancies Act in Ontario, or the equivalent in Quebec, and you're dealing with, in Quebec, the Tribunal Administratif du Logement, or in Ontario, the Landlord Tenant Board. So you have to govern yourself accordingly. You have to understand the rights of the tenant, the obligations of the landlord, the rights of the landlord, and remember that although you're a designated, registered charity and you're an empathetic group, when it comes to residential rentals, you do have to toe a hard line. I mean that in terms of the kind of the stickiness of the rental agreement and the firmness of it, the knowledge of the expectations of both parties. This is a transaction. It's not a charity effort. And they age poorly if you let them, these residential tenancies agreement. They age very poorly. And a lot of us aren't in the business of being a landlord or being in the mindset of being a landlord. And we're here to support that. We live that every day with respect to Hollier House, in fact, and I do have a background in that world. So please do reach out if you have a residential tenancy kind of engagement, question, plan, whatever the case may be, and we're happy to support. Through arriving at proper rent thresholds and kind of quantifying what the value is of your property, supporting the management of the property, tenant screening process, navigating the standard lease agreement, and beyond. So we're here to help with respect to that. But as I said, we also have access to these rental templates and can plug you in with, whether it's in Quebec or Ontario, the standard lease agreement templates that you would have to use. Any questions? And just to kind of scope in on it, you're talking about one-time rentals or recurring rentals of parish space, parish hall? Yeah, that kind of thing. Okay, so the question was navigating kind of the insurance component of renting out parish hall space, or whatever the case may be, to short-term renters. So we do have on our diocesan website under the property tab a bit of a tutorial. It's more or less a video tutorial using a tool called Scribe that my colleague Amy cooked up. And she can walk you through a third-party insurance, a third-party insurance provider that would enable the renter to get an insurance certificate, and it would give that insurance certificate, it would give you visibility of it. So there is a tool that would work that way. Yes? So the question was, in terms of capital efforts, in the event that one is undertaken, does the parish have to then reflect the change to the diocese, or does our diocese have a kind of a central registry of that type of building data or what have you? Yes and no, we do. We have building survey responses that kind of speak to different elements of each parish that was able to respond, which was the majority, but not all. So there may be some data gaps there. But from an insurance perspective, what we report to our insurance broker involves just kind of the high level indicators of a property. So square footage, previous value, and then of course any sort of major additions. And really they would look at square footage or did you put in more stained glass because that's its own insurable element, or any sort of major significant components. So they don't really look to that. They don't have boots on the ground that go every year and investigate and appraise. It's more of an indexing exercise. So I would say to your question, probably not. We don't really need that level of data as it stands today. Okay, well, thank you all, and I'll be available at break.